a stray dog. Now, this dog was somebody who I met a few years ago, and I was actually on a trip to Turkey. It wasn't a holiday. I was there for actually the best part of a week. And what was happening was that it was a research week. It wasn't researching Turkey. It was about research methods, good and bad research, etc., etc. And I'm interested in research, and I've carried out some research myself. So I found myself surprisingly attending this week of lectures and workshops, and it was something I didn't think I would do because it was easy not to, but I believe it was important because it can improve the standard of work that you do if you're involved in research. Anyway, so I was there in Turkey, and at that point in time, I was training for a marathon, so I had to do a fair amount of running, and I found myself getting up fairly early in the morning or going out in the evening to do this running. And Turkey was lovely, the people were friendly, the food was great, and all that kind of thing. And then one evening I was running along through an area that I kind of roughly knew the geography of where I was. And I noticed a few stray dogs, and there were a few stray dogs. And a couple, I think initially it was three, started to trot along beside me. I was jogging along, and eventually, because it was a fairly longish run, the other dogs, they just sort of drifted away, apart from one. So a couple of the dogs that were there for a reasonable length of time, one dog stayed with me. And this dog was pretty big, but quite scrawny, tall, but obviously a bit undernourished, relatively healthy, kind of lightish brown colour, short hair, almost, I mean, it was not a Great Dane, it wasn't that size, but very friendly. And it just ran along beside me. Now, of course, I was aware as I'm running through an area where there are stray dogs that maybe one of them could have been, well, bad-tempered, let's put it that way around. And all sorts of things could have happened. So I was very aware of this. And when the dog started running alongside me, I was also aware of, you know, how are they? What's their temperament like? Is this safe? Is it okay? And this big dog, well, he seemed to be the most gentle of all of them. And there was a point, and I suppose you've got to trust your intuition with this, and maybe you've got to be reasonably good at reading dogs in this instance. And he kind of nuzzled towards my wrist as I was jogging along. And he did that a few times, and it was, to me, an extremely friendly gesture. Now, I'm aware that, you know, you've got to be careful from any dog, anywhere, close contact, what may be going on. And you might not like the next part, and you may think, well, that was a bit daft. But this big dog, he gradually just took a hold of my wrist very gently, like he was holding my hand. That's what it felt like to me. And we kind of jogged along, and I didn't want to move this arm too much. And he was, in my opinion, saying, hey, you know, I like you, let's be friends. And also part of me thought he was saying, can you look after me? And so occasionally he would let go and we'd trot along together. Then he may do a little bit more of the wrist holding very gently. And by and large, we settled into a routine where we were covering a few miles. Or as I recall, it was a few miles. Not 10, not 20, nothing like that. But it meant that we had to go through several areas that neither of us, well, at least I wasn't familiar with, and I'm not sure about my dog companion. He seemed to be a little bit wary from time to time. And in the shadows, we could see other dogs just standing off to one side. And I got the distinct impression that if they had been not nice and had kind of, become aggressive, then my friend would have been on my side. That could be wrong, that could be anthropomorphization to an extreme degree. I was aware it wasn't a Disney movie, but I just had this sense from this young dog. Anyway, all was well, and we returned to the apartment complex where these studies were taking place. And I couldn't let him in, and I thought, well, he'll just go and drift off. But he lay down on the grass and waited outside. And eventually someone from the complex later on that day said, does anybody know anything about a dog that's sitting outside? And I said, well, yeah, I do. We went for a run together. He's befriended me. And is he still there? And the lady said, well, yeah. I thought, gosh, what do I do? I can't really take out food. I can't give him water. That's obviously going to be frowned upon. I don't think that the owner or at least the manager of the complex was too happy. But I did have a conversation with her and said, look, this is a lovely dog, a lovely animal. Is there a way to, how would you rescue a dog? How would you take care of it? How would you maybe take it to the UK or do something? And she said, well, there are these things you can do, but it will cost you this amount of money. And I thought, okay, that is a lot of money, and it's a lot more money than I had for sure. And yet I found myself looking at this little soul and thinking, I don't think I can leave you. I really don't. And so I undertook to actually find a way to help this dog, to rescue it in some shape, way, or form, if it was there the next day. And I don't know what time of evening or maybe early morning it went, but it went. And it didn't come back. I never saw it again. And my hope is that the dog found someone else who could take care of it, or other people adopted it and looked after it. It's possible, although it was a few years ago, that dog is still alive. If it is, I hope it's had a great life. If it isn't, I hope it had a great life. And when I think about that dog, I get, well, a strong sense of affection, love, sadness to a degree, because I never knew what happened to my little or quite tall friend. But during that run, during that time that I spent with him, I developed a real attachment. And I think he did to me. But again, anthropomorphization, yes, dangerous. But I felt that he did. And I felt that we were a little team, and I felt that he was part of my family. Maybe I was part of his. And then when I think about the stray dog, I never did give him a name. I didn't think that was right at that point in time. So I just think of him as the stray dog, this little soul wandering about the streets. When I think of that stray dog, apart from the love, the affection, and the sadness that I feel, I also think about the fact that this was a different country. As actually I'd never been there before, and it was a particular area, a particular region, a particular part of the countryside. And so here in a different country where I didn't speak the language that certainly a lot of people spoke and speak, he was a different species. He was an animal that was a dog that I had never met. And I made this strong connection, this strong bond. And then you look around the planet and you think of the people who are connected, of course, the people who have those bonds, the people who are empathic to others and others are to them. And it's heartwarming. But you can also look around and consider the conflict, the fallout, the the anger, the hatred, the fault lines that appear to have manifested even more these days, whether they're cultural, ideological, theological, whatever they are, they're fault lines. And it means that it's very difficult at times for people to get along. In fact, the opposite can happen, where there is hatred. People despise others, other individuals, other groups. And of course, I understand that within those groups and within those individuals, there's a sense of, well, there's good reason to be like that. There's good reason to dislike these other people, to hate these other people. When we do that, we're finding difference. When we do that, we're looking at contrast. When we do that, our more primitive forms of thinking are activated. And I just hope, I just pray that on one hand, if I and others, and I appreciate some people don't like animals, don't like dogs, I get that. This is an example, and animal lovers and dog lovers, I think, will understand what I'm saying. And even if you're not, I hope you also understand what I'm saying. That if I can reach across to another country, to another species, and form a bond that sticks with me to this day, then surely there has to be some way that we can find empathy with others. I don't say it's going to be easy. I don't say that I don't understand some of the anger and hatred that is going on amidst different groups and different people. Of course I understand it. I've been in those places and spaces myself. It's easy to fall into that type of thinking, which is fueled by those strong emotions. But it's also, I believe, easy for most of us to experience empathy, to find that connection, to find those things in common, to find those things that allow us to look at another individual and realize that despite the fact that they might look and sound different from us, that we do have things in common, that we can, dare I say it, find love, the ability to love someone, not to be in love necessarily, but to love, to generate that empathy, to connect. And I believe that one of the routes to that is indeed to be as mindful as we can, to be as calm as we can, to look around and consider, almost like creating a list, methodically, logically, consider those things that we have in common with others. There will be things that aren't in common. And I also have to add in the mix here that I believe that for empathy under certain circumstances that exist on the planet today, it will need both individuals or both sides to really find ways to compromise, to really find ways to get along. But it's got to begin somewhere. And for me, every time I look around and something is potentially triggering, or I see individuals, I see groups who are different from me in mainly ideological ways and ways that I don't agree with, I'm fighting to not slip into that quagmire of dislike and othering these individuals, this individual, and to stay clear of those more base and destructive emotions. I'm no saint. I'm not perfect, not remotely. And I'm not saying that it is easy for any of us to do. But if we don't begin with ourselves and work on ourselves and simply say, well, if you're not doing it, I'm not doing it, then where will we end up? Where will we end up as a planet? Not in a good place. And more these days, it would seem that there's just division everywhere. So, anyway, It's, I believe that empathy is one way that we can heal. I believe it's one way that we can take things forward. It will take more than one person, of course, but I come back to that basic premise. If I can find that connection, if I can find that love, that empathy in a different country with a different species, and yes, I admit I'm a dog lover. There's a bias in there, of course. But when you think about that, you step back and think about it. 4 legs, you know, different physiology, different way of communicating, and yet that connection, surely we can find ways to connect with others in a peaceful and meaningful way. Anyway, that was my thought. I wanted to share that story with you. I hope you find it useful and potentially thought-provoking. Let me know. At the moment from me, bye for now.